The first thing you do when dealing with foreclosure, especially wholesaling, is you have to understand the process. Okay. So a lot of you hear terms thrown around. You hear the word pre-foreclosure and you hear the word foreclosure. So if you want to put in the comments, it's kind of like a learning exercise, is tell me what you think the difference between the two is. Because you have to understand these definitions, because I find a lot of people, they don't understand the difference and they use the words interchangeably. And you can get away with it for a while, but it's going to catch up to you, because if you don't understand the difference, it's hard to help people out not knowing if they're in pre-foreclosure or in foreclosure. So go ahead and put in the comments of like what you think the difference is, and let's help people out here. So I know the difference because unfortunately I've had to sit down and be confronted with lawyers and judges with it. So, and yes, Justin, we'll talk about nods as well too. So I'm just talking about the basics of understanding the difference between pre-foreclosure and foreclosure. It is so important to understand it. So Kevin says 30 to 90 days late to pre-foreclosure, 90-day plus foreclosure. And honestly, it's a pretty good rule. It's not exact, but Kevin's pretty much dead on. So Kaylin says pre-foreclosure is before the foreclosure. Yeah, that's not wrong either. That's pretty good too. Brandon says, oh, I missed it. Brandon says pre-house hasn't been set for auction. Kind of true. So let's see here. Sean says foreclosure is when the mortgage owner is in the process of seizing the property. And so to be honest with you, all your answers here, they're actually right, but let's give you some definitive like legal definitions so you understand, because sometimes sellers will tell you, I'm in pre-foreclosure, I'm in pre-nod, I'm in foreclosure. So you have to quickly assess this, because the biggest challenge is when you get a foreclosure lead is identifying what processes it's in. Because I'm here to tell you, there's issues with foreclosures, and if you don't catch it at the right time, it's a nightmare. So the worst thing you can do is attack a foreclosure and find out there's nothing you can do. And I did this all the time in the beginning, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can catch these, because there are certain types of foreclosures, there's not a lot you can do. And I'm going to show you which one. So I'm going to pull up a graphic here. Let me clear this off of here. So guys, we're going to go over pre-foreclosure and foreclosure. So let me pull up a graphic I have. I'm going to put it on the screen. Let me make this. Hopefully you guys can see it. Don't ask me to zoom it in, because, well, I'll probably kill the entire live stream if I do that. So, so it's understanding, and a pre-foreclosure is basically when in the first, as the gentleman said before in the live, he was accurate, anything within the first 3 months. So when you get a mortgage, like you close on the property, it was happy, 30 days later, you owe a note payment. So if it's $2,000 a month, you pay $2,000. If you miss 1 month, you get a nasty notice in the mail, you get some late penalties. And then when you miss 2 months, the letters get much harder, and you're probably going to get a phone call. If you miss the 3rd month, you're going to get I call it a pink letter, but it's sometimes red depending on which bank you get it from. And they're telling you, hey, this is your final notice. If you don't do something about, we are going to file a legal action against you. This is your final warning. So that's it. So the sweet spot on pre-foreclosure is basically someone that is behind between 1 month and 3 months. Okay. Now, there's a certain percentage of foreclosures where people are missing 1 month payments all the time. I never panic on one payment. Like, people can skip a payment, or meaning just people have stuff going in life. When it goes to 2 and 3 months, the problem is if you can't afford 1 month, you definitely can't afford 3 months. So if 1 month's $2,000 and say you miss 3 payments, that's $6,000 plus the new payment coming up. This is how they snowball, and people feel like it gets out of control. So you've got to understand the process of how it works. So in that 1 to 3 months, you're not even in the pre-foreclosure state. So You kind of are, but you're not. So from a legal definition is basically you're getting very hard letters from the bank. Your credit's getting trashed and the bank is threatening you with all sorts of legal action. And that's most people freak out. And then hopefully if you're marketing these people, that's when they connect with you. I love when somebody calls me within 3 months behind because it's very manageable. If I want to take over the payments, I want to do anything like that, I have options. When someone calls you and they're like, I had someone do a JV with me and they were 14 months behind on a $2,000 payment. It's a lot of money. That's $28,000 just to get it right. And then the house needed repairs and everything else. So it's critical you identify what stage of foreclosure they're in. So in the beginning, when they're just running late, that's my favorite time to catch them. Now, when you move over to the pre-foreclosure window, basically a notice of default is filed, also called an NOD. And it's basically a public record saying, we got a problem. And it's really designed to scare the homeowner, which is rightfully so. If you sign the mortgage, you should probably pay it anyways. But that starts the beginning actions so the bank can try to recuperate the property. Okay. So once you do a notice of default, now you're in the pre-foreclosure. This is usually when the bank's going to reach out to you and try to do all sorts of fun stuff. So in the pre-foreclosure process, this is when the bank's going to reach out and say, listen, can we do a loan modification? What if we adjust this and do that? And listen, that's great. And I'm going to walk you through all that. But most bank adjustments, they try to work with you, like a forbearance, all this other stuff. They're all usually disasters in the end. So they have like somewhere between a 60 and 70% failure ratio, and it's by design. So as you move from left to right on this chart, we're walking through the process, and a lot of you are going to catch these right at the pre-foreclosure, going into the formal foreclosure process, and you've got to understand this. So the sweet spot obviously is between that 1 to 3 months and before they set an auction date. Okay. So what happens is once they do a notice of default, then the bank's going to try to squeeze the homeowner one more time, like do this, or we're going to sue you in a foreclosure. And then what they do is they file a lis pendens, and then a formal lawsuit is filed. And what the bank is trying to do is repossess the house so they can sell it to recoup the investor's money on it. Okay. Now, I'm telling you right now, the spot where you see where it says auction date set, that's where you've got to be really, really critical. And you're going to notice if you guys market the foreclosures, the people that call you the day the auction's set, their motivation's through the freaking roof. Like their motivation won't even seem like, hey, whatever, take the property, do whatever you got to do. The problem is their motivation is because they've waited till literally the last moment to do something. And honestly, I'm here to tell you, it's hard to help these people out. These are the same ones you tried to catch when they were 3 months behind. And depending on what state you are, we're going to talk about that. So in Florida, the average foreclosure takes about a year to 16 months if nobody really fights it. Okay. Now, it all depends on what type of state you're on. I'm going to go on that in a separate slide. So once they set that auction date, the motivation goes through the roof. But guess what? You can't do anything. What are you going to do? They've gone through the entire court process. No one's objected. The judge has signed, sealed, delivered, put a judgment against them, the whole 9 yards. So of course they want to sell it now. Now they're stuck because they're going to kick them out of the house. Here's the problem is you have to hire an attorney 9 times out of 10 to reset the court date, or you got to do some ridiculous, you can do a ridiculous technique where you have the homeowner file for bankruptcy, but to be honest with you, it gets fraudulent. And I've never, ever recommended that unless that's what the homeowner needs to do. Once you start doing stuff like that, you're talking, guys, anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000 to $6,000 of your expense to try to stop that auction date. And there's no guarantee. Do not mess around with them once an auction date's set unless you can close the thing like lightning fast. And most of the time, guys, when they get to this point, there's very little equity ever left in the house. And honestly, they usually owe more than the house is worth. Now, you'll see there's a time for a short sale window. I used to be the king of flipping short sales back in 2009 to 13. I'm here to tell you, the short sale game has changed. It is messy, it's long, and the banks usually put a 90-day resale restriction on it. So if you think you're going to do a short sale and make it work, the problem is you got to own it 90 days for most of them. Any type of Fannie or Freddie Mac backed loan, they're going to put a 90-day restriction. Back when I did the Wild West, we had no restrictions. So we actually enjoyed short sales. Today, completely different story. So I wouldn't rely on that strategy alone. So let me pull this slide off. You guys take a picture, you can replay it, you can freeze the screen. But guys, once they start saying auction date, like, do not let their motivation overly fool you. If the auction date's set within 30 days, you are going to most likely have to hire an attorney. And unless you have massive spread in the property, which you probably aren't, in my opinion, it's not worth it. Now, I'm here to tell you 75% of the people on your foreclosure list, they're going to wait till they get an auction date to call you because they procrastinated to that point. Don't waste your time when it gets to that point. It's very hard to help them out. And you're talking about a guy who has hired legal help and do all this stuff. It's 50-50 at best. And attorneys don't like to get involved in foreclosures. The laws, a lot of the precedents for the judges, you can't just throw an attorney at the last minute because you look really guilty. Okay. If you've had an attorney the entire time, it's a different process. But when you throw them in right for a court date, 9 times out of 10, the judge just kicks it out. He doesn't care. He knows what they're up to. So, and then when they find out that the investor hired the attorney, it gets really ugly. So actually, the homeowner has to hire him, and you have to pay for it. And for that reason, unless the attorney's representing you, do not bring him in. Attorney can advise you, but like, you don't want to get stuck with like a legal bill. So let me get back on point here. I'm seeing your comments. So you guys know the difference with it. The next thing you need to understand is judicial versus non-judicial. Okay. You're like, what the heck is Rick talking about? There's 2 types of processes to file mortgages in the United States. So you're either in a judicial or non-judicial state. Guys, Google it. It's all there. Like, you don't need me to tell you. Florida is, in my opinion, is one of the easiest places to deal with it. So we're a judicial. So if you're judicial, it simply means that in order for the bank to repossess the property, they have to go through a formal foreclosure and go through the entire court system. A non-judicial is much more expedited, like in the state of Georgia, I believe Hawaii. You guys know which ones they are. Is the process is they don't even have to go through the court system. And a lot of them can be done in as little as 90 days. I found this out the hard way. So make sure you know what type of state you're in. It's really important, because if you're in a non-judicial state, the good news, bad news. The good news is they move fast. The bad news is they move fast. So if you have a homeowner that's dragging, it's not going to last long. So you've got to understand when you do that. In Florida, at the peak of the crisis, it was taking 3 to 4 years to foreclose on a property. Now they're down to like just over a year. So in a non-judicial, it moves much, much, much faster. So here's the thing that nobody ever talks about. Did you know in all 50 states, you have statutes on the book protecting the homeowner for their rights when they're in a distressed property situation? The definition of a distressed property situation is when they're behind on bills, when they're behind on a lien holder that has a judgment, that has a lien against the house. So in the state of Florida, if you are behind, and so I go and set an appointment and meet with the homeowner, I'm a wholesaler. It doesn't matter if I'm a wholesaler, a realtor, anything. By the way, if you're a realtor, you're held to a much higher standard when you deal with somebody in foreclosure. You don't believe me? Look up the laws. It's one of the reasons I tell you guys, do not get a real estate license unless that's what you want to be a real estate agent, because it's going to even make you more liable. So in the state of Florida, I'm not going to go through all 50 states. If somebody signs a contract with me, they have 3 days to cancel for any reason they want. And here's my rule in foreclosures, okay? If somebody wants out of a contract in foreclosure, talk to them. Worst comes to worst, just let them out. You do not have the power to file an affidavit. None of that's going to work in these situations. You need their 100% cooperation. Do not try to strong arm somebody in foreclosure, because you can get a hefty fine for it. So in the state of Florida, we have a disclosure. We let them know they have a 3-day right to cancel the contract for any reason, anytime. We make sure they're completely sober, they're of sound mind, they've had a chance to review it with an attorney if they want. I don't share my paperwork because I'm not an attorney on this. So simply, guys, what I want you to do is you look up your statutes for foreclosures. So they have rights when they're in foreclosure, and then they also have rights if the bank winds up putting the house for sale. They have like a right of redemption and stuff like that. So in Florida, there's very, very tiny window. I think 48 hours, and you have to have like a ridiculous claim. Some of the other states, though, it can be as long as like people have up to like a year to buy the property back, like some crazy laws. So understand what you're getting into. And remember, that's only if the bank forecloses and then takes the property back. So I'm not a lawyer and expert, but I'm just here to tell you, you have to know what your disclosures are for your states. You're not particularly concerned with what the rights are when the bank takes it back, because you're not going to be there for that. But if you enter into a contract with a homeowner that's in distress, make sure that you've disclosed everything you possibly can. And sometimes disclosure is just writing an addendum in your contract. That's what I did in the beginning, and then we got a little bit more formal about it. Now, if you guys are a licensed realtor, you have to go way above what I'm talking about, and I'm not even going to advise you how to do it, because you're at massive risk, in my opinion, as a licensed real estate agent trying to buy a house in foreclosure, because you've signed a fiduciary responsibility. And honestly, it's going to be a constant conflict no matter how you fight this matter. This is why I tell you guys, getting licensed can actually fog the mirror much worse. And you guys were sold it was supposed to clear the mirror for you. And I'm here to tell you, in my opinion, it doesn't. I have been called to question on foreclosures, and they want to know if I had a license, and I didn't. Luckily, the homeowner was cooperative, and I took care of the homeowner, and it wasn't an issue. But I'm just telling you, they can go after your broker, they go after a license, they can go after the errors and omissions insurance. It's so easy to penetrate a licensed realtor. It's one of the reasons I don't think you should get your license, particularly if you're going to be a wholesaler, unless that's the business model you want to do. Okay. So the next part is, we're getting to wholesaling on it, is you have to set up the expectations with the homeowner. If they call me, hey, listen, the property's in auction 30 days, I'll do whatever you have to do. My expectation, I go, listen, I'll take a look at it, but honestly, I don't think it's going to work. I tell them up front, I'll take a look. I'll run it by my lawyer and see what we can do. Unless you're willing, and here's what I say, you ready? Unless you're willing to hire an attorney to try to save it off, I don't think I can work with you. Because I've paid for the attorney. Guys, I'm telling you, it's disappointing. Like, most of the time the attorney goes, there's nothing I can do. Even when I paid him $1,000, $1,500 to file a motion. So, and anybody who tells you to have the homeowner file for bankruptcy just to avoid the sale, in my opinion, it's fraud. It's not, it's ridiculous. If they were a case for bankruptcy, they would have done it from the get-go, or like a couple months into it, not right before it. It's very transparent, and you don't want to be associated with it. So set the expectation. So if they call you in the beginning, I'm highly flexible with them. I want to meet with them, and I want to hear their situation. They call me at the end. Are you willing to hire an attorney to delay the foreclosure process? 9 times out of 10, guys, they don't have money to do it, and they're asking you to do it. I'm not going to do it. Now, unless it's a really smoking property and it's one I need, it's really hard to do. And then, by the way, I've done contracts with a property under auction for 30 days, and it always comes down to the day, and I usually have to hire a lawyer to go to the court to try to stop it, because trying to get the final payoff it's like, to get a payoff for a property going to auction typically takes 2 to 4 weeks minimum. It's not like your standard like payoff on a mortgage on the deal. So, okay, I'm looking at the comments. I'm going to finish up here, and I'll go over everything on that. So, make sure you set the expectations up in the beginning. So remember, we always talk to you guys about preconditioning the seller. It's no difference in foreclosure. You have to be highly flexible, and they got to be completely committed to doing the deal. So listen, if they tell you the property's coming up for auction and you're brand new to this or even experienced, just understanding you're probably not going to spend a lot of time with that customer, because they've procrastinated to like till the very, very last day. Okay. So we've gone over disclosures. So it's important in the expectations. The biggest challenge people have when meeting with you, when their house is in foreclosure, this is the one thing they all tell me. Okay, thousands of people. Ready? They don't want to be judged. And you've got to understand that. You can't judge them, even though like it's kind of natural. I'm like, you don't pay your mortgage, this happens. Um, and I let them know I'm not here to judge you. I'm just here to help you. So if you tell them that in your expectations, it helps out a lot. Guys, remember they called you, you're loyal to them. I'm not a big fan of the banks anyways. You know how I feel about them. They pay us no money. They lend our money out at like much higher interest rates. And like most of my accounts, I don't even get paid any type of interest. Like you're lucky just not to even lose your money in the bank these days, it feels like. So they don't want to be judged. So here's the most important part you have to understand is when you come, so you meet with somebody in foreclosure, hopefully they're not at the auction set date, and now you're going to qualify them. Go, Rick, I'm going to rip through the 4 qualifying questions. It doesn't work when they're in foreclosure. Okay. The sale price, kind of irrelevant at this point, to a point. You know what I'm talking about. The timing, that not, once again, the house is getting into foreclosure. The condition, okay, that's a qualifying factor. And then their motivation, you already know what it is. So there's only 1 out of 4 that need to be verified when we do our traditional qualifying. So if you get stumped in this part, like nobody tells you this. So here's how you qualify somebody that's in foreclosure. Okay. You walk them through a lot of times I walk them through the day they bought to the house to the point of where they've gotten to right now. Let them tell that story, and I promise you, you'll probably have 10 pages of notes. I don't take notes, I mentally take the notes because I don't want to scare people with paperwork. That's your qualifier. Like you don't have to go in the traditional 4 questions because you already know 3 of the 4 questions. Okay. It's so important. The other thing you have to watch in foreclosure is if somebody bought the property a year ago and they only put down 2 or 3% and they haven't made like 6 months payment, unless something crazy's happened in your market, there's most likely no money in the deal. And I don't want you wasting time with those people. It doesn't mean you can't help them out, but you can't refer them to a realtor because that's just going to make the problem worse. But you might be able to have them walk through a forbearance or anything like that. So when I'm going through the qualifying process, I put everything on the table. I let them tell the story because you got to hear it from them. And then they're going to walk through, I lost my job. And then this happened to my husband had a stroke. And then the bank called us and they offered us to do a loan modification. And we tried that. It didn't work out. And then we talked to like a few realtors. And by the way, if they don't bring it up, you walk them through it. Just get all the options out of the way because in the end, in foreclosure, if you're not the only solution, you're not going to get a good deal. Okay. So when you qualify people in wholesale and for wholesaling foreclosures is walk them through the process from the day they bought it to the day they're having a problem and called you. And honestly, it's going to answer 95% of your questions. The only one sometimes I walk into like the condition of the property. And most of the foreclosures I buy, they're in decent shape. They're not horrible shape. Some are really bad, but the ones they're living in, for the most part, are in really good shape. Okay. Now, here's another rule in foreclosures: you will never ever, and you got to repeat this one, never ever promise to have them live in the house after you buy it. It's you can't do it. You break so many rules. There's actually, if you went to evict that person, you would actually have huge challenges. Okay. I see people do it all the time. Oh, I'm going to buy it. You can stay in the house 90 days. I just knew somebody personally, they went through this. He lived in the house for 2 years afterwards. Guys, you can't afford to have people in the house unless that's something you want to do. That has nothing to do with wholesaling. That's fix and flipper stuff. But it's hard to evict the original homeowner, especially when you bought it like right before a foreclosure. So keep that in mind. We're almost done, guys. I'm going to answer all your questions. Deficiency judgments. You got to understand this because a lot of people will go like this. This is a lot of the objection we get. Well, Rick, you know what? It's such a hassle. I'm just going to let the bank foreclose on the house. I don't care. I don't care about the equity. Okay. So if they don't care about the equity, how do you overcome that objection? And it's simple. You got to talk about the deficiency judgment. So if they bought the house for $300,000, okay, and say they owed $300,000 on it, maybe the bills racked up, they put down 3 to 5%. and say the house went down, the house is trading like 250 now. Okay. By the time they put all the lawyer's fees and the back payments on it, they're going to add another 20 grand to it. There's going to be a $70,000 deficiency. Okay. So if they walk away, let the bank foreclose on it, which people do this all the time, the $70,000, they get a notice. I forget the name of it. I don't know if they get like a 1099. I think it's 1099-C. So I'm not an accountant, and then basically they owe that money and they have to pay taxes on it. So can you imagine if you don't have money and then you get a $70,000 tax bill, and for the average person, 70 grand is going to push you over that basic threshold, and you're going to owe somewhere 15 to 20%, depending on how much money you make. So that means you're going to owe $14,000 to the IRS when it's all said and done. So you thought it into the foreclosure, but it winds up in there. So when they say, listen, Rick, I don't care about the equity and stuff like that, I always say this: are you concerned about the deficiency judgment you might get against you? And they're like, what are you talking about? I go, well, here's the problem is you've racked up a bill. They're going to sell the house for whatever the market says, and whatever the difference is, you're responsible for it. They're like, well, I can't pay that. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Not only are you going to be taxed on it, you have to pay this, and they'll put a judgment on you. And if you have a regular 9-to-5 job, they'll go garnish your wages. They will chase you down to the end of time to get the money. So a lot of times, if you do a foreclosure correctly, you can help mitigate a deficiency judgment just by working with the bank and trying to help them out. So as of lately, this hasn't been as big of an issue, but going forward, it's going to be a huge issue. So if they go, I don't care about the equity, I'm like, well, are you concerned about a deficiency judgment? Think about it. If they walk away from the house and it gets trashed or somebody breaks into it, it just lowers the value of the house. And whatever the bank has to spend on fixing up the house, they just bill you for it. So last but not least, I'm almost done. I'm going to do all the questions here. Wholesaling foreclosures is a procrastination monster. Everybody in foreclosure has a procrastination excuse. Okay. Honestly, the only one that holds weight to this are tax delinquency people. And listen, when you owe a lot of people money, you get good at avoiding people. So I've had bill collectors when I was a lot younger. I got really good at avoiding them. The biggest problem you're going to have in a foreclosure is when they just can't make a decision. They just feel frozen. Okay. The great part is you can wholesale a foreclosure just like you do regularly. The only difference is how you qualify them, the disclosures, and making sure you're catching them at the right time. Okay. As far as wholesaling the foreclosure, you actually get a lot of time to do it. The challenge is never getting your buyer to move. You actually have to have a 90-day window with them. And most people know that with foreclosure. The challenge is always getting the homeowner to move out of the house. It's very, very hard. And honestly, that's where I get the most resistance. So this is where the procrastination monster comes in. You just got to learn to talk to people and walk them down a funnel and let them know if they don't do anything, they've already made a decision and the inevitable is going to happen. And you're going to allow a lot of tears, a lot of crying, a lot of swearing, and you just kind of get used to it after a while. But that's it, guys. I mean, as far as wholesaling a foreclosure, it's really the same process you do with the rest of your houses. You just got to do a lot more care with the seller, and you have to catch them at the right time.